All right. Well, hey, everyone. Thanks again for joining us this evening for our Monday guest speaker. We are so excited to have Mark with us tonight. Before we get started, though, just a few announcements and kind of housekeeping items for everybody. So, this is tonight's event as part of our Monday guest speaker series. We have three more on the books coming up. So on next week, August 28th, we're having one of our data mentors talk about career paths in data analytics. On September 11th, we're having a former mentor talk about AWS certifications. And then on September 18th, we're actually having one of Mark's colleagues, Troy, talk about Chat GPT and prompt engineering. So we're really excited for all of those. As a reminder, we will post updates about those in Slack. No need to register, just show up. But if you do have any ideas for possible speakers or possible speaker topics, please feel free to message me. We try to do a nice little variety of speakers, but would love to hear from you all on what you would like to hear about. A couple of reminders from our careers team. So we are working on some more events, hiring fairs, things like that for you all. We do have an event coming up with UPS next month. That event is open to folks who have completed at least one full class. So if you're in modular, hold tight. We will have more events for you all closer to the end of finishing your modular session. And keep an eye out on that jobs channel in Slack. Now that we have our full careers team in place, we are really getting a lot of postings and having a lot of meetings with employers, and we'll have a lot of leads there for you all. And then finally, for our modular folks, if you're attending this as part of your career readiness requirement, please remember to fill out the form in Google Classroom to get credit for attending. If you have any issues finding that or have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me or your career coach, which is either Jenny Terry if you're in the greater Louisville area, or August Mapp if you are part of Code Kentucky, so either Lexington, Northern Kentucky, or Eastern Kentucky area. A couple housekeeping items. Please keep yourself muted throughout the presentations so that we can eliminate some of that background noise, but there is a chat that you're welcome to use for questions and comments. And then Mark is planning to have plenty of time for questions at the end. So we'll open it up to questions at that point as well, but I'll be monitoring the chat in between in case anything immediate comes up. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Mastroianni, who's going to present on Agile Methodologies. Thanks again for joining us tonight, Mark.
I'm so grateful to be here. Hi, everyone. 45 of us have decided to spend a little Monday night time together, and I hope it'll be a very useful and practical topic. For me, it's very practical. This is what I do on a daily basis at work. And where's my work? It's a company called Engineering. We do software consulting for clients all over the country. We're based here in Indianapolis, Indiana, 23-year-old company serving our clients with excellent high-level software consulting, including the right use of Agile methodologies. And I'll get into a little bit of that. I'll sprinkle in some of my personal stories as we get into some more of the content. But why do we even need methodologies, Agile methodologies, to do high-level software engineering, right? Why would we need something fancy or unique when it comes to software? Well, you don't really need a methodology if you're going to the grocery store for milk. You have one item to go get. The number of tasks might be about 6 or 7 tasks. Put the key in the ignition, drive to the grocery store, get into the grocery store, find, purchase, and bring home the milk, right? It couldn't be more simple. It starts to get a little bit more complex when you've got a weekly grocery list for a family. Okay, so now we're getting into unique tastes, and we're getting into a budget that comes to the family. We're getting into 40, 50, 60 items on a weekly basis, sometimes depending on the size of your family. What if you're also a busy individual with both family obligations and work obligations? You not only have 40 to 50 items to go collect, but you have a finite amount of time to go get it. That's where some thought comes into sequencing. Do I understand the layout of the grocery store? Have I been to this grocery store before? Is it exactly the same as the last time I went? Did they reconfigure the store on me over the weekend and I didn't know it? What about one more level of complexity up from there? What if I'm actually running a restaurant and I need to send one of my colleagues to go get the groceries while I'm prepping some of the long lead items in the restaurant that take longer to baste and to marinate and to roast and to smoke? Can you tell I'm hungry? So in a restaurant, you might consider something a little bit more elaborate and a little bit more sophisticated than just a to-do list for 4 or 5 different individuals. You might actually want to think about coordinated effort. You might actually want to think about coordinated effort on finite resources, right? Coordinated effort with either a small number of people, dollars, and time. Okay? So back in the late 1800s, assembly theory started to become present in the manufacturing industry. Fast forward through the 30s, 40s, and 50s here in the US, auto industry and industrial and World War II accelerated the ideas around taking multi-step processes and laying them out in sequential order. Project management matured after World War II as soldiers and officers came back from World War II with all these ideas that they've been trained. Fast forward to 2001, okay? About a dozen software engineers decide all this project management stuff is really great, but software, we're seeing a new and unique set of circumstances where project management often fails. Project management isn't bad in and of itself, but maybe there's something new and different. Maybe there's something better, okay? So I'm going to start sharing my screen and adding some props here. All right, away we go. So I'm going to share some things that are public and some things that I've homebrewed, okay? So if you can see my screen, little thumbs up. If you can see the screen, the Agile Manifesto, this is from a website that I can share with everyone. Thank you for the thumbs up, everyone, all around the class. Thank you. So these 14 individuals met at Snowbird Resort in Utah, and they said to themselves and to each other, there's got to be a better way. What about coordinated effort with scarce resources and finite resources? Is there something about software development that's unique, that we can think of things more differently in a new and better way? Okay. So I see a hand, but I'll come back to you in just a second. Let's talk about this manifesto. These 14 minds came together in 2001 in Snowbird, Utah, and said, what if we could emphasize the things that help accelerate delivery of value to users? Okay, so you're going to hear me talk about users and value a lot tonight. Users, it's anyone who's going to consume your output. Value, it's what you're delivering. In the eye of the user, if it doesn't have value, we'll come to this in a couple slides, it doesn't really matter, right? If you're delivering water, that's very valuable, but it's ubiquitous. It's for everyone. Then what we're doing here is coordinating effort, pulling highest value work to the front of the line with scarce time, dollars, and people. Okay. So what we're going to emphasize here tonight in Agile is preference and prioritization. There's going to be a set of words that we're going to steer our behavior and attention towards. We've got a couple questions, and I promise I'll come get to you. Let me finish this idea of Agile at a very high philosophical level, and we'll get into nitty-gritty details in just a few seconds. So what Agile prefers, and these 4 pillars of the Agile Manifesto are very important to just keep in mind. There's no quiz here, but these are the ways of thinking and behaving that will be reinforced through the activities that Agile frameworks then are built upon. Okay? So Agile Manifesto prefers individual interactions over process and tools. Process and tools aren't bad. You don't throw away all your processes and tools. However, individual interactions are preferred. It's always you lean towards individual, quick, one-on-one interactions more than leaning back on a checklist that you might have available to you and your team. Working software is number 2. Working software over comprehensive documentation. I can tell you, coming from industries that use Agile that make medical devices or equipment that protects and defends our country, you will need documentation along the journey. But working software determines the value. You give something that functions to the person who is intended to use it, and you get feedback. Always preferred over a piece of documentation that says, here's what's coming your way, or here's what we're going to do. Third is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So again, it's a preference. We're not ditching these things on the right-hand side. We are preferring very quick and frequent touch points with the actual user to make sure that we're on the right track. Do you prefer blue or red? Do you prefer a button on the left or right? Are you a left to right written culture, or are you a right to left written culture? All of these important pieces of information get fed into the team to deliver the next piece of value back to the customer. Last but not least on this philosophical part, and we'll get into some nitty-gritty tools and techniques, is responding to change over following a plan. This may be the most important and different aspect of Agile methodologies than classic project management. Again, we're not throwing away a plan. A plan is as good as the information that was used to build it. In modern technology, and this predates 2001, but it's even truer today in 2023 than it was when it was written 22 years ago. Customers change their minds, and that's okay. We need to be comfortable with that change. And if we fall in love with the plan that we built with each other, because it took us $50,000 in 3 months to build the plan, we are probably going to miss the best value to our customer by not listening in the 3rd tenet and not reacting to change in the 4th. So I just want to pause there. Any key questions? Again, at the highest level, philosophically, this is different than classic project management, but classic project management isn't bad in and of itself. And I can share all of these links. These are public information. Any immediate first wave questions 10, 15 minutes into our session? Okay. Shannon, you'll stop me when we need to take a pause. So let's dig into something a little bit more practical. Oh, I see Edwin has a question. Is this intended to be used when the project is finished? So no. Great question, Edwin. Agile methodology should be used before, during, and after delivery of value to a customer. Specifically, there is no after. All we've done is deliver value to a customer, and the feedback from the delivery of value goes back into the beginning again. It's a continuous loop, whereas project management, I'm certified project manager, PMP since the year 2000, and project management is very linear. You know what the success will be, and 18, 28 months later, you spit out the product that you promised, and it's exactly what you had written down in the first 2 to 3 months of the project. Agile is much shorter, 2-week loops, and we'll get into this 2-week idea in a few seconds. All right, why Agile? So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so it's easier for everyone to read. There we go. So again, a lot of this material is straight from the Agile Manifesto and the Agile Alliance. Why are we doing this? Why do we choose Agile? It's right there in the word. They chose the word Agile because the world was moving so fast and project management was failing so frequently. I can honestly look at all of you in the camera, all 49 of you in the camera, and I can say, when I was doing classic project management, I failed many more times than I succeeded. Because at the beginning of a project, the requirements were as good as we could write them, but the market changed, the customer needs changed, and systems behave differently when they're integrated than when they are written down on paper. Okay? All right. So if Agile responds to change by giving quick, tight feedback loops based on scarce resources, finite time and cost and people, why do we hear so much when we think about Agile? What is Scrum and how does that relate to Agile? Scrum came along from a couple Japanese optimizers of project management as a metaphor for how you would apply Agile in a talented team. Okay? So think of a rugby scrum. I didn't play rugby growing up. I learned it as an adult. Okay? For those of you who don't come from a culture where rugby is very frequent, the picture you see on the screen is called a scrum. You have 2 talented teams with specialized skills with a single goal: get the ball and move the ball to go get a try is the name of a touchdown in rugby. Okay, you have a common goal, many people, diverse skills, diverse experiences with a single goal. Okay, all right. So I mentioned a few of these a moment ago. You have a team of people with a common goal. If I'm just a single individual going to the grocery store for milk, probably don't need a Scrum team. Probably don't need Agile, okay? But when the complexity goes up, when the interactions between modules, components, classes, depending on your stack, hardware and software, if you're a cyber physical product, like a medical device, wireless Bluetooth that requires security, oh my gosh. What we need is something that allows for those talents across those teammates to be utilized for the common goal. So not everyone is a technology expert on a cross-functional Agile or project management team, typically. Also on a Scrum team. Not everyone understands the customer's needs. Not everyone has the talent to break the product and service before a customer comes in contact with it. But let's be clear, there's a common goal. Okay? So let's move on a little bit. These are approaches to take complex problems and work as teams with a variety of skills and talents to get to that common goal. And I love what I'm seeing in comments about all the different pie recipes. We're gonna have to send that out as a separate thread. All right, so this is our team. We want to achieve this goal. How do we win, right? All of us who are in this world, there are times where I need to go in a silo, go focus and do one thing for 2, 3, 4 days. There are times where that does occur. That's when I've been given a task, but most often we will all find ourselves in a diverse and cross-functional team. On these teams, there will be roles. The roles we play might or might not be our title with the company that we're working for. But these roles have specialties that we can utilize to accomplish that common goal. Okay. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. I pepper in information from Agile Alliance, from my own personal experience, and from the Scrum Guide. It's another nonprofit organization called the Scrum Alliance that provides free materials to people who are doing really tough things across cross-functional teams. So 3 team member roles that you may be asked to take on temporarily or long-term. Product owner, okay? So product owner is the person whose voice of the customer is most clearly trained. They may meet with the customer on a regular basis. They may have been trained with special skills to create and prioritize what's called a backlog of work. That's your grocery list, going back to our analogy of the grocery store or the restaurant. You know what you need. The head chef, to accomplish a menu, knows the ingredients that need to be purchased. In addition, the head chef will know in what sequential order those ingredients will need to be mixed and the timing in order to get them to restaurant patrons fresh and delicious. Okay, then there's the Scrum team. All of us are part of the Scrum team. We can call that the Scrum team or the Agile team if you're not using strict Scrum metaphor. And the Scrum Master, this term is being morphed and changed these days. You may hear Scrum Master, team leader, team coach. I actually like team coach the best, and that's the role that I take on most frequently on my day job. I'm not writing code. I'm not testing code. I'm coordinating. I'm like that head chef or a symphony orchestra conductor, helping to make sure that the ingredients are helping to make sure that the vision and the goal is achieved in the most efficient manner possible. I understand the laws of group dynamics in such a way that I help to remind the team when they need to dig in and focus or step back and observe and learn. Okay. So these aren't just titles. Very often, especially in startups, you may wear more than one hat in any given organization. Think of these as responsibilities and not just job titles. On bigger organization, you may have that on your business card, but you may not, right? So we're going to introduce you to this metaphorical or pretend team here. Steve is your Scrum Master. He's teammate number 1. You, the reader of this training, you're teammate number 1. You're an individual contributor. You're a software developer. Your teammate number 3 is Pamela. Pamela is the product owner. Pamela's got the voice of the customer. When any 2 things could be done on any given day, Pamela decides which one is more urgent than the other based on her knowledge of the voice of the customer. That's who wins. The customer is supposed to be present in the room, either physically, so that's the best teams I've ever been a part of, often bring in the customer and get their feedback, but often it's the product owner or the person with product owner responsibility that goes out and gets the information and brings it to the team for prioritization. So the rest of your team are like you. They're contributors to making the goal possible. We're going to meet the rest of your team now. You've got Ted is the tech lead, right? On some of these cross-functional agile teams, if there's a domain or a subject matter stack, right, you may have a technical lead whose role it is, again, to break ties. The team should be adults and mature enough to make their own individual decisions on a daily basis, how to sequence their work to get their tasks accomplished. But in times of ambiguity or complexity, you go to your tech lead for tiebreakers. You have more peers on the team. You'll have Jessica and Greg. Teams are very well tuned, and this has been a part of a variety of scientific studies. Great high-forming teams have a single goal over a short, finite period of time with a finite number of people. 5 to 12 is okay. 6 to 8 is ideal. You want to have multiple things happening concurrently, share the overall load to get to the goal, but not overwhelm the team. The moment you go beyond 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the number of communication channels goes up exponentially. So the value delivery can plateau and then hit a point of diminishing return and drop when you have super large teams on a finite goal. Okay, this is studies that far transcend me or my expertise. Let's talk a minute about what we're delivering. And keeping with our food metaphor, what is value? What are we delivering as a software development team? The Agile Manifesto says working software. Well, working software is great. It must be valuable to that fourth person represented in the Agile Manifesto, the customer. Okay? Value. Value is a task I couldn't do yesterday, but I can do tomorrow because of the work of the team I'm on. That task I couldn't do yesterday, some people call that a user story or just a task. Think of it as something that's complex, that requires more than one person to do. And so sometimes we just call it a user story or a use case. But the evidence, right, what's called acceptance criteria of this value, I am now a customer and I'm able to do or experience something today that I could not do yesterday. Okay. How does that occur? How does value occur? Deployments. We deploy on cadence. Deploy on cadence. In every 1 week, 2 week, 3 week cycle, these are called iterations or sprints, we can accomplish a finite amount of tasks. And at the end of that finite period, that iteration or that sprint, we have delivered a use case or several use cases that couldn't be accomplished before. That's the value that we delivered. We release it from only an environment that we control, that we can see, to an environment that the customer can control and see. There's some nuance here, but there's a difference between a deployment and a release. We say we deploy on cadence. Every cycle, we're delivering something valuable. Tasks you couldn't do before, you can do now. But we release on demand. The customer will tell us how often they can consume new use cases, new value. There are times where the rhythm of the team, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, is just too much for the customer to appreciate the value that the team is delivering. So it might be intentional that the voice of the customer, the product owner, and the customer-facing teammates bundle our value and release it on demand, it's called. So that might be monthly or quarterly, but the purpose is, as a team, every cycle, we're doing something new that could never be done before. Okay. Real quickly, I'm just going to go through this. So this is how flow occurs during that iteration. There's a few different styles here. We're going to spend a moment This is kind of nitty-gritty tactical detail. You may have seen sticky notes up on a board. You may have seen virtual sticky notes in virtual teams. This is how you visualize. This is one of the principles of Agile. After you go through those 4 high-level manifesto statements, there's actually 12 principles that go along with it. But it's a little too deep for us tonight, okay? But visually, you can see how well or how poorly the team is doing. This is very helpful for the coordination and the flow of value every single sprint or iteration, okay? Kanban is a style, right? It is constantly bringing things in and constantly digesting and delivering things on the other end. Typically, in Kanban style work with an Agile team, it's one of these stickies at a time per person, typically, all right? This is a visual indicator of the work being done and a visual indicator of the percentage of work overall completed towards a goal. You can see 4 of these stickies are done, 3 are in the doing process, some called work in progress or WIP, with another 7 to do. So we're about halfway into the wish list, the backlog of everything the product owner, the voice of the customer wants us to accomplish. And we're making progress, right? This is Kanban style, right? Now, refinement. Refinement is one activity that a team will do together. The word from metallurgy is, hammering that metal till it's the shape and the strength we need it to be. In software, think of it more like I can ask as many questions as necessary until I know I can begin the work. Okay? We need to refine as often as necessary for the team to feel good that the next iteration we can plan. And what's implicit in my statement, planning requires the whole team. This is a very communal and democratic process. We make sure that all of us achieve a sufficient level of understanding through the refinement process to estimate the work in the next iteration. Okay. So the what questions, there's what questions, how questions, and why questions in refinement. In refinement, I need to get to a sufficient level of understanding to estimate the work. There's technical understanding and there's value understanding. I can ask the product owner, the voice of the customer, as many questions as necessary in refinement to get to a sufficient level where I feel confident I can begin the work. I can then also ask the tech lead, the stack, the technology subject matter expert, any questions on how the work will be accomplished. Which Lego blocks will I use in this particular code to build towards this particular foundation piece, or this roof line, or this column? All right. Now, if there's a story in the team backlog and I don't understand the customer or business terminology, what value is this? What is the value of this task? That I ask the product owner. As I mentioned a moment ago, the product owner is that voice of the customer. I understand why we're going to do it and approximately why it's such a high priority, because in refinement, we're talking about the very next thing we plan to do, which means it's of very high priority. Okay. What if there's a story in the team backlog I don't understand? I don't understand the attributes, like its priority, its dependencies on other teams, how to use the Scrum process to deliver the value. Who do I ask that question? Steve, the Scrum Master. Steve's going to help with the process by which we accomplish team goals. The efficient path between point A and point B, what we're going to deliver as the product owner, how we're going to deliver it as the tech lead, and by what process steps we're going to use. That's the responsibility of the Scrum Master. We encourage, because of the Agile Manifesto individual interaction tenet, the #1 tenet in the entire Agile Manifesto, we want you to ask questions. I, as a Scrum Master, if I'm in the product owner role, we want those questions, because what inevitably happens when there's a question in the team that's not being asked is a teammate, let's say any one of you receives one of these cards. It has a description, you don't understand it, you're afraid to ask, you sit on it. What happens to the team if you're sitting on your ingredient to the recipe or your piece of the overall software project? Delay. The goal doesn't get accomplished as soon as it could. So we as a team require and draw out these questions. I've worked with introverts and with extroverts. These questions are not easy, but that's actually why, it's another reason, going back a couple details here, why smaller teams are so much better. We have such diverse personality styles on any given software development team that I'm more likely as an introvert to ask a question to a 3, 4, 5 person group than I am to a 30, 40, 50 person group. I can ask questions one-on-one after the refinement session, before the refinement session. Individual interactions are valued over any of the documentation or processes. Don't worry about the plan, ask me, so that we can, as a team, get to our destination sooner. Okay, so complexity, uncertainty, and effort. Okay, sizing the work. So what I want to focus on here for a moment is anytime there's a piece of work that's coming to a team, that piece of work is written in the smallest possible way that the voice of the customer can think of. However, the refinement process may find ways to break it into even smaller pieces. I'm not going to use a food analogy for the moment, but let's use like a garden hose analogy. Isn't it easier to get smaller pebbles through a garden hose than a big rock? There are times in refinement where we're going to smash the rock to get smaller nuggets through the garden hose. There is a lot in Agile methodologies and frameworks based in flow theory, moving a lot of little tasks every day so that the boulder gets from one end of the garden hose to the other end as fast as possible. Okay, so we're going to talk about estimation here. You're going to be asked as a teammate on an Agile development team, whether it's a Scrum team, Kanban, or Agile team, to estimate the effort it will take for you to do the work. Okay, so you'll be asked the size of the effort. The size of the story is not just the time it will take to do the work. Okay, I will not be accurate in my own estimation of the time it will take for me to do this work. However, if I look at a piece of work through these 3 criteria, it starts to be a little more even and balanced no matter which team member is going to take the work. I'm going to be asked how hard it will be to do this task. Complexity, uncertainty, and effort wrapped together. Then I'm going to be asked to put a number on that user story based on those 3 criteria. Most Agile development teams use Fibonacci numbers. Okay, So I'll go through this very quickly because I don't want to get into advanced, intermediate, or advanced principles. I want to give everyone a taste for the typical day in a life of an Agile team. Why do we use Fibonacci numbers? Because they're not time. A 1 is the smallest amount of effort I can think of for any given user story. For example, in order to bake a cake, it's going to take me a Fibonacci sequence number of 1 to mix the water, egg, and sugar. Okay, that's a 1. It's the smallest possible thing I should do without breaking it into the tasks of putting those items into a bowl. It's a diminishing point of return to break it that small. I'm going to mix the ingredients. That's my task, and I'm going to give that a 1. All right. A Fibonacci of 2 is, just think of it as twice as big. It's not a counting 2. It's the double effort of a 1. If mixing the ingredients in a bowl is 1, whisking it is a 2. For me, I leave lumps. That for me is more difficult. So I would give the whisking of all the ingredients in that bowl a 2. Twice as much overall effort. It might not take exactly the twice as much time, but it's around twice as much effort for me. And so on up the Fibonacci sequence. A 3 is not a 2 plus a 1. These aren't counting numbers. A 3 is 2 2s. All right. It's the effort twice as hard as a 2. So in my analogy of baking this cake, it would be the baking and stacking without destroying the overall structure. That's twice as hard as the whisking. And so on up the Fibonacci sequence. What you'll see from advanced Scrum Masters, when you get into 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and so on, it's too big. What you inevitably are seeing from the team when you're getting into numbers that high is a lot of uncertainty or a lot of complexity that should go back to refinement and be broken into smaller pieces and discussed at the team level. Okay, so there's more on this. I can share all these links with Shannon and all of you at towards the end. Okay, let's keep going. A couple more here before we go to Q&A. Okay, so now you've estimated each of the items that are in the backlog as prioritized by the product owner, as refined by the whole team, and as estimated by the whole team. In a Scrum team or an Agile team, you'll be asked to be a part of an event called sprint planning. In sprint planning, you're going to commit to the work as a team that you will accomplish in this next finite period of time. Call it a sprint, call it an iteration, call it a cycle. You're committing to work that you know for sure you can get accomplished. What happens during the session? First, a combination of the tech lead, the PO, the product owner, and the Scrum Master together draft a goal. What will success, what will be the value we spit out at the other end of this cycle? What does that look like and feel like? That's the goal of the iteration for the team. You're going to draft it at the beginning. You're going to talk about what things are most likely to fit in the 2-week cycle, depending on the size of your team and what infrastructure you've already laid in place, what flow you've already established as a team. You're going to finalize the goal, and then you're going to do another scoring as a team. This is pretty typical. Some teams do something slightly differently. I like this method. It's very intuitive. It's straightforward, and it's very direct. I am committing as an individual towards the goals of my team. As a commitment, I'm holding up my hand or giving a score in chat on how likely this team is to succeed on the goal that we've just created as a team. 5 is I'm betting my paycheck we will be successful. 0 is I'm betting my paycheck we will fail, right? So what you end up having is a great discussion across the team if there's score differences. What I'm looking for as the Scrum Master is to see what differences are arising or bubbling up as a result of the confidence score of the work. Okay, Shannon's calling for questions. I'm just going to flick to this one last slide here. And during the sprint, I ask questions. Again, don't be silent. The worst thing that can happen is we fall into uncertainty, isolation, despair. And at the very end, we have another 2 ceremonies. We review the work we've done. And there's a video on this. I can send a link to Shannon at a later time. And then there's also a retrospective. What's unique about Agile is that we don't just give value every single cycle to the voice of the customer as a deployment. We also look at each other and say, teammates, how can we deliver even more value as a team the next iteration? Hopefully, just like you all are making an investment in knowledge and new skills for yourself for the betterment of your future, same thing goes for an Agile team. If we're not looking at how we're working together, healthy and unhealthy practices, we won't improve. So, going back to those 4, we'll end where we began, right? If I leave you with anything, it's a way of thinking. Yes, there's tools and artifacts and ceremonies that are typical to Agile. However, it's more about our communication, behavior, and teamwork than it is about our artifacts or ceremonies. All right, it's 6:50-ish. It's time for some questions. Shannon, anything that pops to your mind that you want to highlight in the chat here?
Yeah, so something I was thinking about is I know a lot of folks, I was just looking through the attendee list. I know a lot of folks are very new. We have some who've completed a full class, but for the most part, definitely newer students. So if they're interested in learning more about Agile, or if they're going to maybe pursue like a product owner role, or if they're just really interested in learning more and potentially getting practice, how would someone do that outside of being in a job where it requires it?
So, great question. The best place to go, there's some free materials I'm posting here in chat. Scrum Guide is free. So scrum.org has the Scrum Guide.
And I'll bookmark all of these as well for everyone to share when we share the recording. So if you miss a link or anything, I'll have those as well.
Yeah. Everything that I've done is a synthesis and simplification of mostly free materials. When you start to get to what's called scaling Agile, when you're a team in a team of teams, when you're a part of an organization that has 8, 12, 20, 50 teams in it, these principles are still used at the team level. These are still the most practical and useful principles and philosophies, even in a huge organization. But tons of free content. And the really cool thing is Agile coaches like myself, we love talking about this stuff. You ask me questions about the history, the maturity, the continuous improvement of Scrum and Agile. You know, I ask you how much time you've got. So the short answer, Shannon, to your question is the organization that you're going to be a part of has a strong opinion about these philosophies and practices. Go to the person whose role it is to optimize the process, typically a Scrum Master or your Agile coach.
That's great. Thank you. Jason had a question in the chat. He said, it seems like there are a lot of things that you could apply Agile to. Is there anything in your job that you would not apply it to?
So if it's already very well defined and there's no likelihood of change, the security layer where the security is being regulated by an outside third-party entity, you have to follow the rules and regulations of a regulatory body. There are times when Agile has less value because you're unlikely to have feedback related change. Okay. So there are times where project management is more better suited, where there's less likelihood of change and where the dynamics on a team are much more simple. If you're a 1 or 2 person team and there's fewer complexity and less communication dynamics, no dependencies on other teams, you might not need all the ceremonies and the refinement and the review and the retrospective.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I know I think at least include a little bit of Agile in our pre-work, or it may be actually in the intro course, but I think most of you all will get a little bit of exposure to it as we're going along the classes here. Mark, so our students make projects as part of their course requirement. So they'll be mostly doing these near the end of their time with us, but as they're working on a personal project, so it's about 4 to 5 weeks in length. It kind of varies based on what they're working on. Is there anything Agile wise that they could maybe include in their solo project, so that as they're talking to employers, they could say, hey, I know this was kind of a one man, one woman job, but here's what I was able to come up with?
Yeah, I would try some of these techniques and tools on your own. A great example on something you could do on your own to see these principles in action is the Kanban board that we talked about a few moments ago. I'm going to flash it back up on the screen here. You can make your own personal Kanban board. And what will be the value of that? The value of making your own personal Kanban board is to see your goal and the progress you are making towards your goal. Right? It's a visual representation of your progress. And you can see things, you can anticipate things on the horizon that might be tough, might be difficult. You may reward yourself personally. That's what I do. If there's something hard or something that I don't enjoy, that's when the chocolate comes. So you can use these principles even at the individual level. And this is a good example.
Awesome. And I think that also really kind of tied in well with Joshua's question. I think that was good timing. Joshua, to your point, yeah, Trello is a tool that you all can use. I was actually just looking it up to share the link. I know that we've had students use that in the past to help guide their projects and make sure that they're kind of staying on task there. And then one other thing I would add is your project that you're doing for the course is going to be a solo project and something that you come up with and put together, but there's nothing stopping you from working on a project with your peers. And I think that that gives some excellent practice, especially with Git and GitHub and some of the other pieces of development that you may not get by just working on a project on your own. So I think a lot of these methodologies and tools could come into play if you're working on like a more group project as well. Well, if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. But Mark, I guess from the questions or just from everything you've shared with us tonight, is there anything that you think maybe is like a key takeaway for folks, or is there something that you didn't get to fit in that you think would be helpful to know?
Just to wrap it up, I think once you learn these new words, they're new words that apply to common practices that we see in everyday life. Once you see and learn these words in the context of software development, you're going to see them everywhere. There are books on change management that are essentially about the value of breaking tough things into smaller pieces and visually demonstrating the progress a little bit at a time. I mean, you're going to start seeing Agile in places you wouldn't expect, not just the grocery store or the restaurant, like our analogies today, and not just on your own personal or team projects. You're going to start to see how human behavior is actually well integrated with these Agile principles. Hopefully that's something that you start to see in everyday life.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I always have the thing where I'll read something in a book and have no idea what it is, and then I'm seeing it everywhere. So I'm sure that'll be the case for this as well. And I think that's good advice too, just for everything you all are learning, because I know there's a lot, and it's like learning a whole new spoken language almost sometimes. But like Mark said, there's lots of resources out there, and I think you'll kind of start seeing some of these things come into play in other areas of your life as well. Well, I want to thank Mark again for being our speaker tonight. I think that was really great. I know I had been to a few Agile presentations before, but I definitely learned a lot as well. And I want to thank all of you for showing up and attending. We really enjoy putting on these guest speaker series. I think it's a great way for you all to get connected to folks that you wouldn't be normally, and to also hear about some tools and resources and technology that we maybe don't talk about as much as in our classes. So I hope you all found the time useful as well. Tomorrow or Wednesday, possibly, I will share the recording as well as some of the links that Mark shared. I bookmarked those. But otherwise, I hope everyone has a great night, and thanks again for being here.
Thank you, everyone.